Hello, hello, hello. Waiting just a second to make sure we're live. Hello, hello. Hi. The Hands of Anna Walker here as we are in the studio of StabThingsIntoExistence.com. Welcome. Today's Tell Me Tuesday is, can I add things to wet felting? Yeah. What kinds of things can I add to wet felting? Well, let's go over some ideas here. First, I have a couple of samples. This piece of flat felt I call my Scribble series because basically I just took some yarn. Now this is wool yarn, so it does felt, but I'm going to show you some things that don't felt that you can still add. But you can add pretty much anything as long as either A, it is a feltable product, or B, it has enough wispy fibers and or open spaces that the wool can migrate through. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Here's another example. This one using something a little unusual to make this lacework design that is not a feltable fiber. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But this bag was made with rovings on a pre-felt, and then I added this beautiful detail with this non-feltable item, and we'll talk about that, like I said, in just a moment. But you can add items pretty much as you want. You just have to be careful in how you're adding them. So let's start with a few things here. First, feltable items. So there are things called pencil roving. There are all kinds of different yarns. This is a spun by me, hand spun, thick and thin yarn. When I was practicing with my drop spindle, I don't do that very often because spinning is not my jam, felting is my jam. But every once in a while I want to have something in the colors that I'm using in a felting project to be able to coordinate with it perfectly, and it gives me something a little different to do with my hands, and they appreciate the break every now and again. So you can use yarns, you can use pencil rovings, you can use, you know, anything that is a wool content of at least, I'd say, 60%. You should be able to use without any trouble in a felting project. Now, what if you see something that you think is kind of cool and you're not sure of the fiber content, but it's fuzzy? Well, you've got these really fuzzy mohair yarns, and because they're fuzzy, see the fuzz on there? Because they're fuzzy, the wool fibers that you're putting them on top of will grab hold of these loose fuzzy areas, and they'll grab hold of it and incorporate it into the felt. So mohair does felt sometimes. It works best when you're using it very judiciously. Don't put it on heavy. Put it on in a very light application, but this is definitely another way you can go. Now, have you got a fuzzy yarn that's not mohair, that's completely acrylic? Can you use that? Yes, just be very, very careful that you've got enough wool underneath it and maybe tiny, tiny wisps of wool covering the non-feltable materials so that they've got something to grab hold of. Basically, if you're using something that is not feltable, think of creating a sandwich. You don't want an open face sandwich because that'll, you know, maybe have things falling off the top of your sandwich, i.e. whatever yarns or additions you're putting on. But you've got a solid piece of wool underneath. You put down your non-feltable items, and then you add another layer of wool. Now that top layer of wool can be a very, very light layer. Maybe it's sourdough, and then you've got your meat and your cheese, and you top it with just a little bit of freshly shaved Parmesan before you put it in the oven. You got a sandwich there, okay? Your non-feltable items need to be captured, even if it's one regular layer and one extraordinarily light layer. Anything that will allow the fibers to migrate through your non-feltable product, like this lace. Now, some of you may remember this from, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. It's probably been that long. This is one of those yarns that you knit or crochet together to make one of those ruffly scarves. Remember those ruffle scarves that were all the rage back in the day? Well, they used these just on one end so that they would ruffle out. Well, you can use the same technique when you're felting and felt one side of this and allow that ruffle to still continue. Just make sure that you've got a base of wool underneath and a little bit of wool on top where you want it to connect, and then you can use this very untraditional item in a felting project. Now, you see this mass of glorious color here? I got this years ago when I was at a cause conference, Kansas Area Weavers and Spinners, and I am pretty sure that these are warp ends from weaving. I gravitated toward it because of the colors here. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is cotton. I know it's definitely not a feltable product, but the colors are glorious enough that if I add it very judiciously, and I'm going to get one of the pieces that I have unwrapped from it, I can add this a la my scribble scarf. I can add this on top as long as I am very careful that I don't have a lot of areas that are, I don't want to put it on top of each other like this and have a really dense area. I want to make sure that it's light and that it's got pieces that are a little far apart, that I'm not overlapping too terribly much, and I can play with this and make a design, and then I can add, as I said, just a tiniest bit of fiber that will felt to the base over the top, and it'll trap this cotton fiber in between those layers of wool and create another type of scribble scarf. So think about the things that you might have in your stash that you could utilize to decorate a felt project. I'm going to move this mass of color a little bit out of the way because I want to show you the next things. Now, there's always silk. Silk is always something that you can use. Any kind of lightweight gauze or chiffon, whether it's silk, you can even use polyester chiffon. As long as you can feel your breath as you blow gently through it, you can use it to felt with. And this is a piece that I could cut up into different shapes to create a design on a piece of flat felt. I could just snip off little bits and trap it in the wool, but any kind of chiffon is definitely a go-to when you're talking about adding a little bit of texture and interest to a felt project. And then we have my favorite, which is always the cotton scrim, also known as cheesecloth. You've seen me use this before, and I love this very airy. I mean, just imagine that the chiffon underneath here is wool, and adding this green on top, the contrast and the detail that you get from this very lacy design is just amazing to me. So this is another fun one that you can either add as a large piece. Again, just make sure you have a very, very fine layer of wool over the top to trap this in between the two layers of wool. But like the chiffon, you can also cut this up into little bits just to add little pops of interest and color to your project. And now remember the bag that I showed you at the beginning? This is what I used to create this beautiful lacework detail on the top. This is another one of those yarns that I cut open. It's basically, it came in a tube, and it's another one of those that, you know, was for knitting up and creating a fluffy, ruffly effect. Well, it was just a tube of knitted fabric, and I cut it open, and then I can play with adding fiber underneath on the one side and on top to trap this in between. If I do this with two very, very, very thin layers of wool, then I have an extraordinarily open, loose, and airy scarf. And I just took a couple of skeins of this and I opened each of them up so that I've got a very organic kind of feel to how this is coming together, and I can create a scarf from the whole piece, or like I used in the bag, I can cut a piece of it off and then manipulate it to give me a shape and a design that I'm looking for. So there are a lot of different things that you can use in your felting to give some interest and texture that you wouldn't get if you were just using nothing but feltable items. So think about the different things that you might have in your stash and play. Do a couple of samples. You know, just take a thin layer of wool, lay down the things. You know, maybe it's some cotton yarns, maybe it's some cotton scrim, maybe you've got some mohair yarns and you want to see what the effect is going to be. Lay down a little bit of fiber, put on whatever it is you're wanting to see what the effect is going to be, and then add the tiniest layer of fiber over the top, and then felt it, and do some samples with the different items that you want to play with and see how they're going to turn out, and if that effect is going to be what you're wanting, or if it points you in the direction of how you need to go. So play with what you've got, see what kind of options are available, and see where your experimentation might take your felting. On another note, there are 2 of the peace flags remaining. 3 of them have been spoken for. Number 1 of 5 is still available, and number 4 of 5 is still available. These are the 2 that featured nothing but French knots in the center of the large sunflowers and French knots in the centers of the small sunflowers. These were created as a fundraiser to benefit the International Red Cross's efforts in Ukraine, and there's a recommended donation of $50 each. These will, the proceeds will be donated to the Red Cross, and I'll show you a post with the donation. These were done in the spirit of the colors of the Ukrainian flag. Each of the skies has a U for Ukraine. I'm going to look for my U on this one. This one, it's hiding a little bit. I know it's in here. I know it's in here. Come on, where are you? Where's my U? Where's my U? Here's my U. There we go. So we've got 2 peace flags ready to go. They are on these cool little vintage-esque hangers. They are numbered, and they say "Let There Be Peace" on the back, and they are signed with my Anna Walker signature down here at the bottom. And if you're interested in either of these, just send me a message and let me know whether you're interested in number 1 or whether you're interested in number 4. And with that, I am going to say goodbye for today. We will come back tomorrow for a What to Felt Wednesday, and I look forward to talking to you then. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Hoping the storms don't do too much damage for all of us from Texas all the way up to Minnesota today. But, you know, hang on tight, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.